Go.
Hello and welcome to the Retail Week, our regular review of the biggest headlines from across the sector in the past 7 days. I say regular, but we're actually live on YouTube today for the first time. Thank you to all 7 of you who have joined us to spend the first part of your afternoon with us today. So this week there's been some contrasting headlines from fashion operators. ASOS's good results overshadowed by some not so good news from the likes of Superdry, Oasis and Warehouse and New Look. Basically here today we're here to discuss whether fashion can fix itself, and George McDonald, our executive editor, and Becky Waller-Davies, our fashion reporter, are here to mull that over with me. First of all, guys, when it comes to businesses like ASOS that are doing well, what is it that they are doing that other retailers like Superdry simply aren't right now?
I think for me, people get so hung up on the kind of the e-tailers versus the high street, and e-tailers have an unfair advantage, and the kind of big business rates question, which I think is, it's very true, but I think that is not the reason ASOS and some of the other retailers are succeeding. It's because, like many operators on the high street as well, they really, really, really know their customer, and people talk about being customer-centric. And often they're either kind of just talking about it, or they frame it in the wrong terms, and they think it's about it. They frame it in a very functional way about being, about convenience and click and collect and everything like that. Well, actually, everybody likes those things. Nobody wants a really inconvenient, awful shopping experience. I think customer centricity is knowing what exactly that individual you want to be your customer likes. Something maybe that they would go for that other people would actually really hate. You see businesses like Ted Baker and Joules and, ASOS, they really know their customers' inner lives and how they want to present themselves, how they think of themselves, what gets them genuinely excited. And I think too often customer centricity is spoken about in terms of functionality. And actually it's way more creative and in-depth than that. Yeah. That's what I would say, I think.
I think it's a really good point, and you think particularly in the context of the store, those sorts of things aren't made enough about. If you want people to carry on coming to a shop, there needs to be something distinctive about how they're treated when they're there, that I think plays into what you were just saying. But yeah, in the end, why do we talk about customers so much? Because they're the ones who matter. They're the ones who, in the end, dictate success or failure, and I do think ASOS is really good at knowing its customers. We used to share an office actually with ASOS a few years back, and one of the things that has always struck me about it is that all the people who worked there looked like the people who bought from it, and I quite often thought, if you have to all intents and purposes, your customers working for you, you're probably going to be pretty in tune with them. And I think, ASOS is very modern-minded. I think it thinks a little bit ahead of the game. And yesterday, when they had their results, they were talking about a new range, weren't they, called Collusion, which they call a gender-fluid label, which is targeting, to use that terrible phrase, Gen Z customers. However, the point is, gender fluid, a lot of people don't necessarily want that. I'm not saying that they do. But is that a big debate going on at the moment? Is it becoming more of an issue? It certainly is. It's talked about much more. And so the fact that a company like ASOS is on that and thinking about what that might mean just gives a bit of an indication of the mindset, that real constant thought about their customer.
Well, it goes back to that thing that I said, doesn't it? It's kind of not everybody wants that. Does your customer want it? You can't appease everybody, you can't please everybody, but you've got to be so in tune with what your customer's thinking. You've got to think exactly like them.
Exactly, and you can go to the other extreme, and who is doing a fantastic job, Primark, doesn't even sell online, but you go into their stores, they're typically rammed. Why? Because they've got product at great value. It's good quality, actually. That idea that it's all going to fall apart isn't true, and shoppers know it's not true. Now, why will their customers go to the shop? Because, okay, it might not be as convenient as we tend to think online is. However, they've got a model that appeals to the customer. The shopper is willing to go there because it fulfills what they want from it. And that's everything from the variety of stock available to how efficiently they run the shop. Like, they've got a really good queuing system, for instance.
I think it's that promise, isn't it? Primark have a promise. If you know you're going to go in there, things are going to be a certain price, certain quality, a certain level, and it's going to be very trend-led as well, some of it. And they've managed to kind of carve out handwriting for themselves that means they're not just like the rest of the value operators. Actually, it's such a robust promise.
Yeah, and it's they know their customer too, so you get all the basics there. In many ways, Primark has usurped what M&S at one time was. M&S was built upon value as well as quality and other things, and you don't need to look very far in Primark to see people shopping there for those very reasons that made M&S originally great.
I should just say before we carry on, if anyone's watching live and has any questions, please do tweet them in using #TheRetailWeek. But just to come back to particularly some of the things you were talking about, George, in terms of the store experience, having the right talent working for you that maybe is one of your customers, launching new labels in the way that ASOS have done. All of this takes a lot of investment, both in terms of time and money. And let's face it, there are a lot of retailers out there operating with very little time and money on their hands. But what can those retailers do to reinvigorate themselves and fix themselves?
I think there are things that they can do, and we were talking about this a moment ago. Most retailers now have quite a pool of data to varying degrees, admittedly, that they could use, for instance, to range their stores more effectively. They can deploy resources they have at hand now to do that. I was hearing earlier, actually, I was at a Future Lab event and I heard about a store that I didn't know about called Nike Live. The first one opened in Los Angeles. And they want that to, as they put it, unite physical and digital retail. And they've done things like select what is in the store based upon what they know about customers in the locality who are members of the Nike Plus club. So that's one example. And I think, am I right, Becky, that...
Yeah, and obviously that's a completely different company to Nike, very different fortunes at the moment. But that's the kind of thing, I think, something which seems kind of so obvious that you're like, why weren't we doing this all along? That actually doesn't cost that much money. I think the really hard thing, perhaps, is just achieving that change in mindset, because that's a huge amount of effort and time, and it's a different kind of investment, but it is one that is free, as opposed to kind of new tech and stuff, which obviously costs just millions and millions.
And one thing which is not free, it's actually very high cost, but you could make much more of it, for people with shops. Make the most of your people. Now, there has been a shift recently across retail to try and release people from sort of back-end focused roles and give more attention to customer-facing roles. But there's you can go a lot further on that. To go back to what we started talking about earlier, if you have a shop, what are the reasons that people are going to go there? And people do make a difference. That's one of the USPs potentially of the store, with all the pressures that are upon it. And if you can't make the most of your the weapons in your armory that are being underutilized, then that's pretty bad, because actually that's not costing you more, it's getting greater benefit, productivity, I suppose, from money that you're already spending on your people. Retailers say they value their people, but there's more value that they could get from their excellent stuff.
I think we have to probably, the retail industry, start thinking about staff very differently, actually. I mean, there's been the whole conversation going on about kind of productivity and making sure processes are kind of, taking out those kind of more back-end roles, making sure people are much more kind of customer-focused. But actually, what's most noticeable when you go into store is whether somebody is happy to be there. And that's not about just kind of doing your job. It's so apparent whether they're kind of happy in their role or not. And I think retailers have to probably start thinking quite differently about how to motivate staff, how to make them feel like they're really valued and they're not just there, to just
Take
kind
the
of
money.
take the money and be very transactional. And that's not necessarily about pay, that's about everything but money.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a real conversation there to be had.
Yeah, and you also think, again, applying this to fashion, you look at John Lewis and their new Westfield store, where, this is off the top of my head, but I think it's right, 6 partners there have made 20% of women's wear sales. Now, it so happens that those 6 are the people who are working on the personal shopping side, giving advice, using their knowledge of the customer to help them make good decisions, and as a result, surprise, surprise, those customers are spending more with them. So again, to me, that's a good example of hitting back, so to speak. They're using their knowledge, they're using their fundamental powers, customer knowledge and their people, and they're getting greater sales as a result. Not something that maybe everyone can do, and obviously John Lewis has got problems to confront. I'm not pretending otherwise, but in many ways maybe that makes them a really good example of the fact that you can hit back in fashion.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thanks, George. Thanks, Becky, for your views, as always. Please do like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. The videos are now free to watch on a weekly basis. Join us again next week. We have Amazon's fashion pop-up, which we didn't actually mention today, but they're launching that next week. And third quarter results from Travis Perkins as well will be in the news. And we'll be here at 12 o'clock again next Thursday to discuss all the big headlines. We'll see you then.